A family finally meets the anonymous organ donor who saved their daughter's life, only to discover an impossible connection. The young man standing before them is the same homeless teen their father had helped 8 years ago. In a chance encounter he'd completely forgotten. "I'm alive because of your daughter," he says, "but she's alive because of what you did for me that winter night." The fluorescent lights of Boston Children's Hospital cast a harsh glow over the waiting room where the Mitchell family sat huddled together, anxiously watching the clock. 12-year-old Lily Mitchell, with her copper hair and freckled face, flipped nervously through a dog-eared magazine, not really seeing the pages. Her mother, Eleanor, alternated between checking her phone and glancing at the hallway where doctors occasionally appeared with news for other waiting families. But it was Robert Mitchell who seemed to carry the heaviest burden, pacing the small area with the restless energy of a man who had spent the last 2 years feeling utterly helpless. Every 3 months they came here for Lily's checkup, and every time the same fear gripped them all. Would this be the day the transplanted liver showed signs of rejection? "Dad, you're making me dizzy," Lily finally said, looking up from her magazine with a weak smile. "The doctor said everything looked good last time. It's just a routine checkup." Robert stopped mid-stride, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're right, sweetheart. I'm just being a nervous wreck as usual." 2 years had passed since Lily's liver transplant, a miracle that had saved her from acute liver failure caused by a rare autoimmune condition. 2 years of recovery, of gradually returning to normal life, of birthdays and school days that would never have happened without the anonymous donor who had given part of his liver so Lily could live. "I still wish we could thank them," Eleanor said quietly, voicing the thought that often surfaced during these hospital visits. "The donor, I mean. It feels wrong not to be able to say thank you for such a gift." Hospital policy protected donor anonymity unless both parties agreed to contact, and so far their letters of gratitude sent through official channels had gone unanswered. "Maybe they're not ready," Robert replied, his voice gentle. "Not everyone wants recognition for doing something good." A door opened, and Dr. Patel appeared, her clipboard in hand. "Mitchell family, Lily's results look excellent. Would you come with me to discuss them?" As they followed the doctor down the corridor, none of them noticed the young man who had just entered the waiting room, his dark eyes scanning the faces there with nervous anticipation. 24-year-old Marcus Williams adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, wondering if coming here had been a mistake. The hospital coordinator had contacted him last week, explaining that the family of his liver recipient wanted to meet him if he was willing. After 2 years of anonymity, something had finally prompted him to agree. He wasn't sure what he would say to this family, or what they expected from him. How do you meet people whose happiness depended on your sacrifice? Would they be disappointed when they saw him, a former homeless kid who had barely managed to piece his life together? The social worker had assured him that the meeting would be brief, controlled, with no obligation for ongoing contact, just a chance for the family to express their gratitude, and for him to see the life his donation had helped save. Marcus checked his watch. The Mitchell family should be arriving any minute now. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Whatever happened next, he reminded himself, at least he had done one truly good thing in his life. No one could take that away from him. Lily's appointment had gone well. Perfect liver function, normal blood work, no signs of rejection. As they headed back toward the hospital exit, Dr. Patel suddenly touched Eleanor's arm. "Mrs. Mitchell, there's something else. I wasn't sure if it was the right time to mention this, but your daughter's organ donor has agreed to meet you, if you're still interested." Eleanor gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Really? After all this time?" Robert and Lily exchanged shocked glances. After 2 years of wondering, of imagining the person who had saved Lily's life, the prospect of actually meeting them seemed surreal. "He's actually here today," Dr. Patel continued, glancing at her watch. "In the waiting room on the 1st floor. The transplant coordinator can introduce you, if you'd like." "He?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "It's a man?" Dr. Patel nodded. "A young man. He was 22 when he donated." "But why now?" Robert asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. "After 2 years of silence, you'd have to ask him," Dr. Patel replied with a small shrug. "People have their reasons for maintaining anonymity, and their reasons for eventually reaching out. Whatever his motivation, he's here now." The family huddled together for a brief conference. Did they want this? Were they ready? What if it changed how they felt about Lily's recovery, to attach a real person to the abstract concept of donor they'd lived with for 2 years? "I want to meet him," Lily said firmly, ending the debate. I need to say thank you in person. And so, with nervous anticipation, the Mitchell family followed Dr. Patel and the transplant coordinator to the first-floor waiting room, where a young man sat alone, his posture tense with anticipation. Marcus stood as they entered, his eyes immediately drawn to the young girl with copper hair, his recipient he presumed. She looked healthy, vibrant, a stark contrast to how he'd imagined someone who had needed a liver transplant. Marcus, this is the Mitchell family, the coordinator said gently. Robert, Eleanor, and Lily. Lily received part of your liver 2 years ago. For a moment no one spoke. The air seemed charged with emotion too complex for words. Then Lily stepped forward, her voice clear and direct in the way that only children can manage in overwhelmingly emotional situations. Thank you for saving my life, she said simply. The doctor said I would have died without a new liver. Marcus swallowed hard, nodding slightly. I'm glad I could help, he managed, his voice rougher than he'd intended. But as he looked beyond Lily to her parents, something strange happened. A flicker of recognition crossed his face as he stared at Robert Mitchell. Robert, meanwhile, was experiencing his own moment of déjà vu. There was something familiar about this young man, something he couldn't quite place. The shape of his eyes perhaps, or the way he held himself tense, as if expecting rejection. Have we met before? Robert asked hesitantly. Marcus's expression shifted from uncertainty to dawning realization. You're the man from the shelter, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. 8 years ago, the winter storm. Robert's brow furrowed in concentration, then his eyes widened. The boy with the infected cut. At St. Mary's shelter. Eleanor and Lily looked between the two men in confusion, as a remarkable story began to unfold. A story of connection that spanned nearly a decade, that neither man had recognized until this moment. 8 years earlier, Robert Mitchell had volunteered at St. Mary's homeless shelter during a particularly brutal winter storm. The shelter was overcrowded, with people sleeping on every available surface, when a teenage boy had staggered in, soaked to the bone and feverish from an infected gash on his arm. Robert, who worked as a pharmacist, had recognized the signs of a dangerous infection and had insisted on taking the boy to the emergency room himself when the shelter's staff were overwhelmed with the influx of people seeking refuge from the storm. You paid for my antibiotics, Marcus said, the memory crystallizing, and you gave me your coat. Robert nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. You were just a kid, maybe 16. You'd been living on the streets for months, you said. I was, Marcus confirmed. My mother had died, and my father was, he paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase, not fit to care for anyone. I'd run away from my third foster home. Eleanor stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disbelief and wonder. You're saying you two have met before, that Robert helped you years ago? Marcus nodded, his eyes never leaving Robert's face. If he hadn't taken me to the hospital that night, I would have died from sepsis. The doctor told me so later. He turned to Lily, his expression softening. And if I had died then I wouldn't have been able to donate part of my liver to your daughter when she needed it. The enormity of the connection hit them all at once. A simple act of kindness on a stormy night had set in motion a chain of events that would, years later, save the life of the very man's daughter. That's impossible, Eleanor whispered, though the evidence stood before them. But it's true, Marcus said quietly. I recognized the name Mitchell when they told me who wanted to meet me. I just couldn't place why it seemed familiar. Now I know. Lily, who had been listening with growing amazement, suddenly threw her arms around Marcus in a spontaneous hug. You saved me because my dad saved you, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. It's like a circle. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, then carefully returned the hug, his eyes meeting Robert's over the girl's head. In that gaze passed an understanding that transcended words, a recognition of the invisible threads that connect seemingly random acts of compassion across time. They moved to a private conference room, where over the next hour, Marcus shared more of his story. After that night at the shelter, the social worker Robert had connected him with had helped him get into a program for homeless youth. He'd finished high school, then community college, and was now working as a paralegal while taking night classes toward a law degree. I want to help kids who are where I was, he explained. The ones who fall through the cracks. When the hospital's organ donation program had approached him about being a living donor, he hadn't hesitated. Someone helped me when I needed it most, he said, glancing at Robert. How could I not do the same? What he didn't share immediately was why he had maintained anonymity for so long or why he had finally agreed to meet them now. But as their conversation continued, he hesitantly explained. I didn't want to meet you at first because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you'd be disappointed that your daughter's donor was someone like me, a former homeless kid, someone who'd been in trouble, who didn't have a perfect past. That's ridiculous, Eleanor said firmly. You saved our daughter. Nothing else matters. What changed your mind? Robert asked gently. Why meet us now? Marcus took a deep breath. I'm getting married next month, he said, a small smile finally breaking through his serious demeanor. Starting a family of my own, hopefully. It made me think about connections, about gratitude, about facing the past and embracing the future. He hesitated, then added, and I wanted to see that it worked, that your daughter was really okay. More than okay, Lily piped up. I'm the fastest runner in my class now. Marcus laughed, the sound brightening the sterile conference room. That's good to hear. Your liver, well, part of my liver is obviously working well. As their meeting drew to a close, Robert found himself struggling with unexpected emotion. The cosmic coincidence of it all, that this young man he had helped in a moment of crisis would, years later, become the donor who saved his daughter's life, seemed too profound to be mere chance. I don't know what to call this, he said finally. Fate, divine intervention, the universe coming full circle. Marcus considered this, then offered simply, I just call it the way things should work. People helping people when they need it most. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor touched Marcus's arm. Will you stay in? Let us know about your wedding, your life. For the first time since they'd met him, Marcus seemed truly relaxed, the tension leaving his shoulders. I'd like that, he said. Very much. Lily, with the directness of childhood, added, your family now. Sort of. You're carrying around a piece of me, and I'm carrying around a piece of you. That's one way to look at it, Marcus agreed with a smile. 6 months later, the Mitchell family sat in the back of a small chapel, watching as Marcus exchanged vows with his bride Sophie. They had been surprised but deeply touched when the invitation arrived, and even more surprised when Marcus had asked Robert to offer a blessing during the ceremony. Some might call it coincidence that brings us together today, Robert had said, standing before the gathered guests. But I prefer to see it as evidence that no act of kindness is ever wasted, that compassion creates connections we cannot begin to imagine. At the reception afterward, as Lily taught Sophie's nieces and nephews a complicated hand-clapping game, Eleanor found herself speaking with Marcus's former social worker, the woman who had helped him after that fateful night at the shelter. I've been doing this work for 25 years, the older woman confided, and I've never heard anything like Marcus in your family's story. It's remarkable. It still doesn't feel real sometimes. Eleanor admitted that the young man who saved our daughter was someone my husband helped years ago, and neither of them knew it until they met in that waiting room. The social worker smiled, watching Marcus laughing with Robert across the room. You know what I think? I think we're all just waiting for our chance to pass it on. The help we've received, the kindness we've been shown. Sometimes we get to see how that circle completes itself like your family has. Most times we don't. But it still matters, Eleanor said softly. Even when we don't see it. Especially then, the social worker agreed. 3 years later, Robert stood in another hospital waiting room, but this time with entirely different emotions coursing through him. Marcus paced the floor much as Robert himself had done during Lily's checkups, stopping only when a nurse appeared with news. Congratulations, she said warmly. You have a healthy baby boy. Mom is doing great. The Mitchell family, including 15-year-old Lily, erupted in cheers. Sophie's parents embraced, tears flowing freely. But it was the look that passed between Robert and Marcus that held the deepest meaning, acknowledgement of the remarkable journey that had brought them all to this moment. Later, as they gathered around Sophie's hospital bed to meet baby James Robert Williams, named in part for the man whose kindness had saved his father's life, Marcus handed his son to Lily with a smile. I don't know where any of us would be without the connections we've made, he said quietly. My life to yours, yours to mine, and now his to all of ours. Lily, cradling the newborn with careful arms, looked up at the adults surrounding her. Do you think he'll ever believe the story of how we all found each other? She asked. Someday, Robert replied, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. When he's old enough to understand that the greatest miracles aren't the ones that defy physical laws but the ones that remind us of our humanity. In that hospital room, surrounded by a family formed not by blood but by compassion, chance and choice, they had created something rare and beautiful, a living testament to the fact that kindness, once set in motion, creates ripples that can return years later as waves of blessing. And it had all begun in a waiting room, with a recognition that spanned 8 years and saved 2 lives, a truly impossible connection that somehow miraculously had found its way home. Outside, snow began to fall, reminiscent of that winter storm 8 years earlier when a pharmacist had taken the time to help a homeless teen. The circle was complete, but its effects would continue to ripple outward for generations to come. In the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by the family that fate had woven together through acts of kindness, little James slept peacefully, unaware that his very existence was proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe conspires to return goodness to those who give it freely. A miracle indeed, not one of divine intervention or cosmic coincidence, but the purest miracle of all human compassion, coming full circle when we need it most. Has someone's kindness ever returned to bless you years later? Or have you helped a stranger, never knowing how that simple act might change both your destinies? Marcus and Robert's extraordinary connection reminds us that compassion creates ripples we may never witness, unless fate arranges a miraculous reunion in a hospital waiting room. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the invisible threads that connect our acts of kindness across time, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs reminding that no good deed is ever wasted. Your support allows us to continue bringing these remarkable true stories to light, stories that restore our faith in humanity's capacity for compassion. What act of kindness have you performed lately? The universe may be preparing to return it when you need it most.